America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker with the Job Creators Network, and today we're joined by Rachel Schilke. Rachel is a congressional reporter at the Washington Examiner and wrote a great piece talking about how small businesses are in the crosshairs of this government shutdown. Rachel, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I read your article, and of course, small business is what we, eat, breathe, and sleep all the time. We're always looking at how government policy, regulations, taxes are impacting our small business owners. And obviously, we're starting to see it's not just a DC thing. We're starting to see kind of the spillover on to our small business owners, whether it's your local pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., or a barber or a dry cleaner, or even hotels. I've spoken with a franchisee who owns some hotel locations between Boston and Washington, D.C. He's being severely impacted. He's lost about a third of his revenue for the month of October, and that's significant considering hotels are low margin business. But talk to us about what you're hearing on how this shutdown is affecting Main Street.
Yeah, so with the shutdown, kind of like a lot of different programs and agencies, and I'm sure as your viewers and listeners know that when a government's in a shutdown, they can't pay these agencies. And so when it comes to small businesses, that means that the Small Business Administration cannot provide the loans that a lot of times these small businesses rely on to help expand their business or provide assistance for getting, items and supplies and whatnot. And so basically what we're hearing on Capitol Hill is that during the shutdown, there's not much that the SBA can do to help these small businesses while we're in a shutdown. Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler came to the Hill last week, and she talked about how right now and I'm trying to find the exact number for you, but basically the agency was able to provide $45 billion in loans to 85,000 small businesses in fiscal 2025, which is great. But now as we're heading into fiscal 2026, she cannot match those numbers or even really get to those numbers because the shutdown has put all of that momentum at risk because these loans are not able to get to the businesses that need them. And so she told reporters that every single day of the shutdown, 320 small businesses are prevented from accessing $170 million in loans. And so every single day, that's 300 of your small businesses on Main Street. And anyone who goes into any small town, even into the city, you can easily find 300 small businesses just by walking down the street. And so I think in the beginning of the shutdown, it wasn't really seeping into the lives of everyday people yet. I think that it was all just focused on federal workers, or it was focused on, small communities or the larger community of our military service members. But small businesses affect every state. It's in every community. And so that is, I think, one pressure point that has really started to kick in this shutdown to start affecting the lives of everyday Americans.
Yeah, I know you wrote that the shutdown shrinks the economy about $155 billion every week that we're shut down. I mean, that's a staggering number. These loans, 320 businesses a day are not able to access the loans that they need. Talk in terms about what these small business owners across the country are using these loans for from the SBA, and how that economic sort of domino effect impacts communities.
Yeah, so the loans can be used for several different things, but in effect of this shutdown, without having access to this loan, storefronts are having to cut back hours because maybe they don't have enough money to pay their employees or to keep their business running for the amount of time that they want to. a lot of manufacturers are shelving expansion plans. So those who want to expand their business into something larger, or they want to expand their supply intake, they can't do that as well. And a lot of businesses that are family run, generational businesses, those who have relied on these loans for years through the generations of their family, they are now faced with the reality that they may have to close for good. And actually, Chairman Roger Williams, who is the House Small Business Administrator chairman, he said, I'm a small business owner first and foremost. My family has a business, been in my family for years. And he's like, and me and other generational businesses are at real risk for closing their doors after 100-something years, which, after looking at the 2008 crisis and other economic crises that we've seen over the last years, it hasn't been this bad, especially with the shutdown hitting almost the record of 35 days.
Yeah, and we often hear about the federal workers that are furloughed. Mm-hmm. And, if you're out in middle America, you think, well, that's Washington, that doesn't impact me. But when you start to think about those ripple effects, that we're seeing after, almost, a month at this point, how do those ripple effects extend to the small businesses who rely on those people as customers? When you think about dry cleaners and pizza parlors and things like that.
Yeah, I'll speak just for Washington is one example. Washington, obviously, as you said, is a federal worker hub, and a lot of places in Maryland and Virginia are too. And so when you think of a memory that I have when the shutdown was kind of fully kicking into effect, you see a lot of congressional staffers hauling bags of dry cleaning down the street on their way home, bags and bags of it on their back because dry cleaners are shutting down and they can't afford to keep open during the shutdown. And that's for maybe businesses on the Hill. Now think about those workers and those government employees who are not getting paid right now. They cannot then go to their local business because they can't afford it. And there's a lot of restaurants in Washington who said that their revenue is cut 30%, that they're seeing less amount of people coming in because a lot of these federal workers are having to go home to their small towns and because they are not getting paid, so they can't pay their rent. And then when you kind of go outside of the bubble, what Chairman Williams said is that 75% of the federal workforce is comprised of small businesses. So even if you think in your community you don't have a federal workforce, a lot of communities do, and a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people rely on a paycheck from the federal government. And if they're not getting that, they cannot in turn go to their main street.
Both parties are, obviously pointing the fingers at each other as they always do. From your perspective and talking to small business owners and some of the furloughed workers, who's really helping and who's really hurting Main Street, not just small businesses, but Main Street in general? What do you think sort of the consensus is? I know talking to the people you're talking to is probably not scientific, but what do you think the consensus is from the people that you're talking to?
I think you were right that it is still largely along party lines. So it really just depends on who you're talking to. Lawmakers from one party will point to another. But if you're talking to Capitol Hill staffers, or you're talking to furloughed workers, or you're talking to small businesses, a lot of them are saying that they're not even really blaming one party. They're just blaming Congress for being ineffective. And that has been something that I've been hearing for a very long time, that just in general, Congress is way too hyperpartisan, and that prevents the negotiations and the debate that make up democracy and make up the way that our government is supposed to flow. I think that right now, though, a lot of federal workforce and a lot of furloughed people and small businesses are leaning towards Democrats. And the reason I say that as to who to blame, and the reason I say that is because Democrats have these demands for healthcare, which I'm sure people have talked your ear off about, but these healthcare demands and even a lot of Republicans have said that these demands are valid, that they are too concerned about the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits. They understand that a lot of people, in their red, rural, small business, Main Street communities, they understand that these people have tax credits that they need to address. But a lot of Republicans have said that, that is a policy fight, not a funding fight. And I've talked to appropriators who have said, healthcare and ACA is not even in our wheelhouse. Funding the government is. And so we're hearing from a lot of federal workers that they just want the Democrats to pass the clean spending bill that's on the floor right now. A lot of them are saying, you've made your point. You have shown that this is a big deal. You've shown that you're willing to fight for it. And we applaud you for that. But now we're hitting, today's the 31st day. We're going to be hitting into 35, I'm sure, very soon. I think once it hits to that record, people are going to still be really angry that the same vote keeps happening and nothing is changing.
It's really what I'm hearing too, is they're angry at Congress from our small business owners, but they understand like healthcare, and they will absolutely concede like healthcare is one of the most expensive line items on their balance sheet, but they want to provide healthcare for their employees. They want to be able to afford these things, and they want a solution to it, but they need the government open for their business to run. And
Yes.
the Congress isn't functioning, and they want to see this debate. They want to see. I mean, the hotel owner I spoke with yesterday said, "Let them duke it out, but open the government so I can pay my employees, because I'm starting to furlough people. I'm starting to lay people off because I don't need housekeepers if I have empty rooms." And he literally said, "Let them duke it out after they open the government." Because this is something that needs solving, and it's something that our small business owners have told us for years. They need the healthcare problem solved so that it is affordable for everyday, ordinary Americans. But small business has really come to be a big talking point on both sides. I know there's a freshman Democrat congresswoman in Virginia that has introduced this new bill. Tell us about the bill that she's introduced to bail out small businesses, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so it's actually a congressman. It's Congressman Suhas Subramanian, and he has introduced the Keep Main Street Open Act. And so under this bill, it would require the Small Business Administration to provide a short-term but favorable loan to small businesses in need based on the estimated losses that they would accumulate during a shutdown. And so he told me in an interview, he said that, a lot of small businesses, and this is not shocking information, but a lot of small businesses can't afford 1 to 2 months of hardship under a shutdown. I mean, like I said earlier, we're on day 31 and people are already suffering. So imagine what happens if this kicks to November, at the end of November. And so he had said that this bill would help to keep them on their feet during a shutdown. And so basically, what he's hoping for is that it will get Democratic and Republican support, because for a very long time, the Small Business Committee, especially in the House, has been bipartisan. There's been a lot of great bills that have come out of there. And I think small businesses is one area out of the very few that Congress can still agree on, that they want to keep Main Street running, that small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And so with his hope, he's hoping that he can see some bipartisan sponsors on this. He has noted, though, that there aren't a lot of Republicans in the Maryland, Virginia area anymore, just with the way that trends are going right now. So he's hoping that he can appeal to middle America or the South states or even up in the East to see if we can get people to kind of come to this consensus that we need to help small businesses during a shutdown. In terms of whether this bill will get any traction, I would say probably not, which sounds very cynical, but I think the thing that we've been seeing under this shutdown is that Speaker Mike Johnson of the House has kind of pumped the brakes on any sort of standalone bill to provide SNAP benefits to people, which are expiring soon. He did not want to put a standalone bill to fund the military. And then I'm assuming that a small business loan bill will also not get any interest from him. And so to his credit, so a lot of Democrats have blasted him for that, saying that that's, not acceptable, that we should be trying to help out these people who are suffering under the shutdown. To the Republicans' credit, the Republicans have said, well, we did pass a bill to do all of this. And that's the spending deal that's in the Senate right now. So, there's both sides are making accurate arguments over who is doing something wrong. It just comes down to whether or not they are willing to continue to fight like cats and dogs while the American people are suffering. And I think that now that we're almost hitting the record of 35 days, I think that that's going to really bring people a reality check really fast.
Talk about what happens if today some miracle happens and they vote and a clean CR is passed. We've lost all this time and we're actually running out the clock on the next CR that will have to be passed. What does all that look like under the scenario of today the government opens, they pass it?
Oh my gosh, from your mouth to God's ears, for goodness. But yes, so what would happen after that is, you're right. We have we have run the clock out quite a bit. The CR ends on November 21st. And so the reason why they picked that November 21st deadline is because appropriators said, we need these 7 weeks to get our bills on the floor. We think we can go to conference on at least 3 of them with the Senate, which is kind of an archaic way of appropriating in Congress, but Republicans have really, with this trifecta, have wanted to get the funding process back on track. So, but because we've already are now in this is the end of the 5th week of the shutdown, there isn't that much time to get all of those 12 bills in agreement, not only to pass the House, which has a thin margin, but then to be in agreement with the Senate. So in talking to appropriators, I talked to House Appropriations Chairman Tom Cole the other day, and he said that they are most likely looking at a January CR. He is very against doing a full year CR, which basically would fund it from all of fiscal year 2026. So basically until September 30th of next year. That's something that fiscal hawks and the Conservative Freedom Caucus are really gunning for. They've always been gunning for that. They want to keep spending as frozen as possible, little increases as possible. But a lot of appropriators do not like that path. They have said that they want to get the appropriations process back on track, and they want to make sure that they can do their job. And so I think what you will see is if, the government opened today, you would see next week House lawmakers running back, talking, negotiating, talking with the Senate, and then having to put yet another CR on the floor. However, Speaker Johnson has said that right now there are no plans to do that until the Senate passes this CR, because in his mind, why would we pass a CR for then Senator Schumer to hold it up in the Senate again? And I don't think anyone wants to see a shutdown going into the holidays, which could also impact small businesses quite heavily. Small businesses are a lot of where people go to get their gifts and go to get their items for the holiday season. And so I think that right now, we would love to see the government open today. But even then, it's still an uphill battle to avoid this kind of crisis again.
So I know that Job Creators Network was part of the conservative coalition that sent a letter to the Senate asking them to open the government. What other things do you think we could do as a coalition to put pressure on these senators to really break from their party? Because I don't think that Senator Schumer can back away from his position because of how much heat he took back in March. It's going to have to be some middle of the road Democrat senators who realize this is the right thing to do. This is not about leverage. This is not about using Americans as holding them captive. I mean, that's essentially where we're at. And they're going to have to get to a John Fetterman position on opening the government and then pleading your case and arguing your point on Obamacare subsidies, because that needs to be addressed too.
Yeah, I think that the letter to senators is a great way that I think has drawn attention, because not only your coalition, but then there was the Federal Workers Union. They sent out a statement to the senators, and they sent a letter. And the federal workers, is the crown jewel of Democrats' agenda. The Democrats have always said that they are the fighting force for federal workers. And so I think as these large groups of people, and I think also reaching out to people who maybe aren't on your side of the aisle, I think the more that you see bipartisanship from communities, I think that is what's going to start to get these centrist lawmakers, these moderate, middle of the road leaders to go and vote for the spending deal. And I think that also something that I have found to be very helpful is that the leaders are bringing forward real people with real stories. So the more I think that everyday Americans, people who aren't, famous or have like a crazy huge business, like I think that just regular Americans who can share their grief and their frustration and their worries about the shutdown, I think the more that those voices are amplified, the more that it will turn those centrist lawmakers to think, oh, well, these are the everyday Americans that we specifically want to help and we want to amplify and we want to fight for. And so I think the more that you see that and the more that you see this crossing the aisle bipartisan efforts from outside Capitol Hill, I think you'll start to see some senators breaking from their party pretty fast.
I hope so. Well, Rachel, tell everyone how they can follow you on social media and read about what you're working on.
Absolutely. So you can follow me on X or Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I'm Rachel_Schilke, and I am at the WashingtonExaminer.com. So you can always find me there. And then I also have my own podcast with my colleague. It's called Capitol Conversations. And we break down the news of Capitol Hill to the rural, everyday, small town communities who don't understand what's going on at Capitol Hill. We're trying to be the voice for the everyday American. So please watch our show. We would love to hear from you.
Oh, awesome. I'd love to check that out. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for joining us, taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network, and new episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.